Alright, so I found a good spot up here on the top floor, so I'm going to be a little bit quiet because I don't want to disturb any of the other residents, but it's got some good lighting here. I don't know how long I can be here because with all this sunlight I really can't see my screen. But yeah, so I want to do some discussion style videos. I really wanted to start off strong, and I thought like, a good topic to talk about would be just the N-word in general. And so I had a lot of you guys really type in the chat or DM me different questions that you had about it, and I did my best I wrote down all of them, and I tried to kind of put them down into a format or an order that would be a little bit cohesive, and that's actually why this kind of, I guess, series can't really be done for me as a stream. It has to be a sit down, write this out, plan it kind of thing, because I get really sidetracked. I could go into story after story and just get lost down a rabbit hole that I kind of create for myself. Or if there's a thing where somebody asks me a question in chat, I'll get so distracted by that and I'll like focus on that so much I just completely lose trail of where I wanted to go. So I don't think I'm ever gonna stream these discussion videos. I don't think. Maybe we'll see with like a easier to tackle subject. But yeah, so I guess the first thing I want to say is someone had mentioned how it was nice to be able to say it without any repercussions, and I guess that in a way that by itself is a really dense thing, because on the one hand you're also like, you're saying, oh, you know, this is a thing that I am aware has repercussions, and it's nice to not have to suffer those consequences. So that's a really interesting kind of I guess train of thought, or that's an interesting thing that I really saw. But as far as like my comfort, I don't think I was ever truly comfortable with it. There was a period of time from literally just 8th to 9th, maybe 10th grade, but so just a year and a half, where I was more lenient with it. And I guess my thought process, and it's hard to say exactly because I was 13, some of the shit that I was thinking just didn't really make sense, if I'm being honest. But I believe my thought process was just, I'll never change it. Like, it was used so often by so many people, especially because like we live in a Latino neighborhood. Even though this is Koreatown, Asians only make up like 30% of the population, and 51% is Latino, and there's a lot of Latinos who use it just because they feel like it. And so I guess I thought, both in the scale of just where I lived, and definitely of course on a global scale, there will never be a point where people don't use it and people just let it go, or people leave it to, oh, only they say it. So I guess I kind of just gave up, because I had actually always dealt with that, not just the word, but a lot of different experiences of racial discrimination. And what the fuck is going on? I'm on the top floor. Why can I still hear that? God damn it. See, this is what I mean. Like, all these sirens are going off, and I've already forgotten where I was gonna go with this. As early as like Head Start, right? So, which is just daycare. So, in the American school system, you have kindergarten, and then grades 1 all the way through 12. And kindergarten is just like, hey, we're just gonna help you develop some of the early childhood skills that you should already have. Some of us go to pre-K, which is like 1 extra year of that. And Head Start is just straight up daycare. Like, hey, I'm dropping off my kid who's like 3 years old or something like that. And ever since, I want to say like Head Start, I can't remember what the name of the school was exactly. It was Philadelphia something, but I was living in the city of Venice, California, and as early as Head Start, like I would be treated differently by a lot of my peers, even though we're all like 3-4 years old. And that was really the only thing that it was I was the only black kid there. Every other kid, and from what I remember, was a Hispanic child, or maybe there was like a small group of white children that I'm just not remembering. It was fucking 18 years ago. And I just remember like there would be a lot of times where I'm trying to look for something to do. I'm not really into playing by myself. I want to play with other children, interact with other human beings. And I would see somebody who's maybe they're using my favorite toy that's there at the daycare center, and I'm like, hey, can we share? Hey, can I play with you? Hey, there's all these blocks, can I come build blocks with you guys? And they would like make a face of visible disgust, like I just took a shit on the floor or something. Like they would make that kind of intense face at me and just give me the toy and leave, like out of frustration, and just go do something else. Or they would just pretend I didn't exist until I finally went away. So that really sucked. There was a lot of times where I honestly just didn't look forward to going to daycare, and it wasn't even a thing of like, oh, I'm leaving my mother now. Like, it was more so I just don't want to go through that every single day. I didn't look forward to the times where we weren't having a sit down with the teacher as a group learning stuff, because then that means that I had no one to interact with, and I had to just be treated differently for reasons I didn't understand at the time. It made me cry a lot, and things seemed to get worse progressively throughout elementary school and middle school and high school. It just really built on, you know. So because of that, I was never, you know, once I became aware of what racism is, and I became more aware of my cultural background, I never was comfortable with the word, but I had been beaten down spiritually so much so that I just said, fuck it, right? It doesn't matter how many times I try to explain it, people won't respond with empathy. They'll respond with, oh, but this, that, and the third, so I should be allowed to say it. And I got sick of it, and I got sick of trying to constantly come up with brand new, you know, reasons why this bothers me and you should not do this. So when I was like 12, 13, which is, yeah, like between 8th and 9th grade for me, because I graduated a little bit young, I just got sick of it, and I said, fuck it, you know, people say it, I'm just not going to say anything, I'm going to just let it be. And there was 2 points of my life where I did that, because I did that again later on when I was like 18, 19, where I had gone through even more severe racism to the point where I was just like really fucking done. And yeah, so if me coming back now and being like, hey, this isn't a word I'm cool with, like, I'm not saying that any of you don't understand that all of you are fucking awesome about that. I've never once had an issue with any of you even like making the joke about it. And those of you who I've known for a longer time, like, you guys have all matured now, so now it's like you guys make me comfortable and safe. Those of you who I'm like personal friends with, you are actually the only people that when I have a conversation with you, I'm not constantly on edge thinking, when is he gonna say it? And that's actually something I'll get into in a second. Look at my notes. Okay, so the use of it, right? The use of it is really complicated, and that's honestly not something that I can really answer for you guys as much as I'd like to, because it's something that I wonder a lot all the time, and it's really a person by person thing. So for some people, like if I'm gonna start with my view, my personal view, and it didn't used to always be this way, I would like for it to just not exist, period, right? I would like for us all to just, that word doesn't exist anymore, nobody uses it whatsoever, and we can just let it die and move on, and, you know, find some better vocabulary for ourselves. Other people, which it's a viewpoint I agree with, is, hey, only black people should say it because it's now a term of endearment for the 250 years of terrible acts against humanity, I guess, that's not the word I'm trying to say, but yeah, just for many centuries of unjust, let them have that word. And the reason I'm okay with that is because that's a concept I believe in for any group of people, for any race, ethnicity, or religion. Like with the word wetback, right? Since most of you are Polish, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but wetback is a racial slur used against Hispanics, but specifically against Mexicans, because since, you know, they're like the country right across the border from us, they would naturally be the people that we see the most in the United States, as far as immigration is concerned. There's a lot of horrible stuff that happens in Mexico. It's not an amazing place. So some people try to run to the States to live a safe life. And many of those people had to try to cross an entire river to get here. And so that's why they're called wetbacks. The reason I say it is because I am a Mexican individual. But, like, I would never feel okay with other groups of people saying it. Or, I don't know. That gets into really tricky territory, because it's also not a severe word. Like if I was speaking to, let's say, an Italian person and they said wetback, I wouldn't like feel threatened and shit, right? If they call me one, I would. And that's the same view that I used to have about the N-word as well. There was a point in time where I was like, oh, you know, and this was me trying to justify it in my head to make myself more comfortable with it, because I'm already telling myself it's gonna happen no matter what. People are always going to say it no matter what. I have to get used to that. So to try to thicken my skin, I would tell myself, oh, well, you know, you're saying it, but you're not calling me it, so it's okay. And it's really not. I was like lying to myself for a very, very long time. And that's very damaging. Even if the lie is small, that can be very, very damaging for any person to really go through. Now, other people don't view it as a serious problem. And that does include other black people as well. Other people see it as, well, it's all a thing in the past, so who cares if anybody says it? But that's because they individually aren't offended by it. And what's interesting about that is, if you were to call them that word, and, you know, with a harsh tone, like the connotation of how you use the word is clearly meant to be insulting, they would be offended and they would lash out. So it's, to me, the people in the black community who don't find it offensive, it's pretty hypocritical, because there's always going to be at least one situation where it does bother you, and where maybe you'll instantly respond with violence. And that's another thing I should probably touch on too. I think it's in my notes, right? I'm sure it's in my notes. I'll just trust that it is. So yeah, why people use it, it's because everybody has different viewpoints. And that's really the tricky thing about this whole thing is, oh, well, how should we as non-black people treat this or respond to it? And it just depends on the person that you're with. There are black people, a lot of them, who don't have a problem with people saying it, and they won't call you out on it. But you should also, like, if you have a black friend, or maybe you're in somebody's live stream and they're black and you see that they're allowing you to say it, I think it's still a good idea just to ask if it's okay, just because it might be a situation like where I was in when I was younger, where I'm super uncomfortable with it, but I'm allowing it to happen and I don't want to call people out. Because my thing is, I came from a very, very rough household. I experienced lots and lots of abuse, and so the side effect of that is that I'm a person who really, really dislikes conflict. I'm not a pacifist. I've fought lots of times. There was even a period where I was doing martial arts and I enjoyed fighting, but I do my absolute best to avoid conflict, even if it's just a debate. And so the one period of time in school that I hated the most was how every couple of months we had to do debates, and I'd be so paranoid about how I would perform in a debate, and I would honestly feel a little bit of anxiety about it. I didn't want to admit it at the time, but you know, now that I'm reflecting and looking back on it, yeah, I was anxious whenever I had a classroom debate about a history subject, to the point where I would stay up for nights on end preparing myself, and I would brainstorm every possible thing that you could ever say back to me, so I always had a response back to you, because I didn't want to be in that position where I don't know what to say. And I guess that's the same fear of me having an open conversation, a dialogue with other people face to face, is I don't know what I'm going to say back to you. And after all these years, I still don't know what I'm going to say back to you. I fear that instant. So yeah, if you do have somebody who's cool with you saying it, right, just do them a favor, do all of us a favor, and just ask them to be sure. If they say they're cool with it, awesome. You know, you do what you do. The interesting part about that too is how we treat it as a group. So if there's a group of us, let's say there's a group of like 7 of us, and there's like 2 guys or 3 guys who allow somebody to use the N-word who isn't a black person. Now you have an interesting dynamic, because I think it kind of depends on where you live as well. I believe this is less likely to happen in the South, but there are going to be times where somebody's going to get tired of hearing it, and they're going to be like, hey, what the fuck is y'all problem? Why do you let him do this shit? And now you're going to create this massive divide instantly, because these people, no matter how close you are with them, let him do something that is considered very, very extreme, and puts people into fight or flight mode, right? That's the power that racial slur has for us, is it puts us into that over the edge mental state. And I think that's why a lot of people respond instantly with violence. It's because they instantly feel threatened. They feel like maybe their life is even at threat sometimes. And it's crazy that a single word can do that. But I guess that's just the history of the word. That's just how bad of an experience it was, to the point where generations and generations after slavery's been abolished, it still has that powerful of an effect on us. So that's a really interesting situation to be in, is when people with different viewpoints are in a group and somebody's being allowed to say that. I sometimes call people out on it. Other times I look around and I'm like, okay, I don't see any other black people who look or feel uncomfortable. And since they don't appear that way, I'm just gonna shut up and I'm just gonna let it be, because apparently the majority of the room is okay with it, even though I'm not. Or there was even a time where I was invited to a Super Bowl party, right? With some of my coworkers. So right after our shift ended, we all drove over there to one of the waiters' house who was hosting it. He had just got a new apartment, and I was meeting people's boyfriends, people's husbands, this, that. And there was one person in particular where I was meeting the bartender's husband, and he had said it. And instantly, we were having such a great conversation together. I was really, really having fun getting to know this guy. I got to see, he kind of is a dick to his wife, but at the same time, maybe that's just how they play with each other. Maybe that's just how they tease each other, and they're both okay with it. I don't fucking know. It's not my business. But I was having fun with this dude, and then he drops the word. And I'm like, shit, man. And I stand there, and I'm not speaking to anybody anymore. People are talking to me, and I'm just like, yeah. Cool. Just one word, because I'm fucking spacing out. And I'm having this rant in my head, and I'm debating with myself. I'm like, no. I'm tripping. I am fucking hallucinating. He said something completely different. He definitely didn't say that. And I'm replaying that 3-second moment in my head over and over, as if I have it recorded on tape, and I'm trying to see, did he say it or not? So I'm just standing there, and people are like, bro, are you alright? Or what's going on? I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. And I'm instantly fucking traumatized. There are even times where I'll be having flashbacks to a lot of other experiences that I had of just, discrimination, like more blatant, more upfront. And his thing is, he had served the Navy. I think it was the Navy. And where he served and the group of people he served with, they allowed, quote unquote, allowed that type of behavior to happen. And the reason I say quotes is because the majority of times where I meet a veteran and we've had that conversation, a lot of them, even if it's a stranger on the internet who was a veteran, and I'll ask them about it, and they say that that's not, it used to be decades ago, but it was never a thing of, hey, this is allowed, you guys can just use racial slurs against each other. It's a thing of, there's so many people who don't care if they use it, versus the small group of people that slur offends, that even if they lash out, they're all gonna get fucked up over it. They're all gonna get jumped over it. Because there are people who are that extreme. So that's where that comes from, that mentality some people have of, oh bro, I served this country, and so I get to say it because I'm used to being with people who don't care. And that's not a justification, because now you're around people who are bothered by it, who do care whether you say it or not, And he said it again, and he said it maybe a third time, and I went over to the host of the party, and I called him over to the door, and I was like, hey, so it's getting late, I gotta go catch my train, I'm gonna miss my train. And that was true. I had to catch a train that day, and I didn't want to miss it. It was already getting kind of close to midnight, and I want to say like maybe 1 a.m. is when the train station was going to close. There was no bus I could take there. I had to walk, so I really wanted to haul ass. And he took me outside really quick, and he's like, bro, what's going on? And another really amazing person, the house party host, his name was Nicholas, really good friends with that guy when we worked together. And another mutual friend from the restaurant, his name is Tristan. Tristan's fucking awesome in just every goddamn way. If he sees this, Tristan, you're a cool motherfucker. And so Tristan and Nick were both asking me if I was fine and everything. And the person who drove me, who I've had issues with him saying the word as well, came out. And I was like, look, man, so-and-so keeps saying the word, and I don't want to make a big deal out of it. Everyone's having fun, people are gambling, people are playing cards. It's been a really great night, and I had fun while it lasted. I just don't feel comfortable. But do me a favor, don't say anything, don't ruin the vibe. I gotta go anyways. I had to leave. Like, if I did stay, I would have only been able to stay for like another 10 minutes. I'm gonna head home. And they're like, bro, that's not fucking right, we'll go talk to him right now. I'm like, no, it's chill. Especially because, like, then that's going to reflect poorly on his wife, because she's going to feel embarrassed that her husband's been doing that all night. And so I just left. I don't think they said anything. I think they might have, like, on the side, when the party was over and he was going home. I think they talked to him about it. And so that was what that was like. This is why I don't stream, because I already lost my train of thought. Oh, people using it. Yeah. So people have a lot of different reasons and excuses for why they use it and why it's said. And that's also why it's part of why it's used a lot in music, obviously, specifically rap. Because they're talking how they would normally talk, right? And there's a thing called code switching, where how I talk to other black people, and me personally, it's not that different, but it's a little bit different than how I talk to a lot of my other different friends. And it's just adapting to the environment that you're in. Because me specifically, I have a lot of friends who are foreign, so I might use simpler English than usual, and particularly I'll stay away from slang words, especially because slang changes from city to city or from state to state. So I stay away from slang words if they're not like American, because even sometimes with Americans it can get confusing if you're not from the same city. So that's an example of code switching. I speak to you guys without using any slang words, but I'll use all the slang I want with other black people, even if we're from totally different cities, because we'll just kind of understand more or less, I guess. And so when rappers are making their music, they're not code switching at all. That's just naturally how they talk. If they say the N-word a lot in their music, is because they say it a lot in general. That's the only real, I guess, explanation I have about that. I personally try not to use it. There was a period of time, the same period when I was allowing people to use it, I thought to myself, like, oh, you know, people might look at me weird if I don't say it, and people are going to ask me. And to this very day, people once in a while, not often, but will still ask me, hey, how come you don't say it? You know, you have the ability to, and I don't. How come you don't say it? Which there's layers to that too, because it's like, why do you want to say it? In a way, you could look at it that way. That's probably not what they actually want to do or anything. Maybe they're just genuinely curious, like 99% of the time. But I felt like I needed to say it back then. I felt like maybe I'm not black enough if I don't use it, or if I act afraid of using it. And now I know that that's stupid, because your vocabulary doesn't determine, you know, what you are. It's in your blood. If you guys never spoke Polish a day in your life from starting today, that doesn't mean that you're not Polish. It's forever within you. You forever come from that group of people. You forever are born into that culture that Polish people have. So yeah, it was stupid of me. And it was all a made up scenario. Nobody ever said those kinds of things to me. So that's why I had that explanation when we did the music review, and I featured in that song, and I said the N-word. And Ivan and Brandon were laughing because they know I don't say it. They hear me say it maybe once a year. And what I try to do is like, oh, okay, you know, me being able to say it, some people see it as like a superpower. So I try to use that to tell jokes with that word in it, and that way we're all just having a laugh about it, and it's extra funny because it's rare for me to say. So, you know, that's just my personal thing about the use of the word. The next thing that I got was a question lots of people have, and is there a difference between the A and the ER? And somebody also said, oh, I know that if I say it with A, it's seen as this way. It's like I'm talking to people who like wear gold chains, but if I say it with an ER, it's like I see you wearing chains or something like that. That's another thing where it depends on who you ask. The reality of the situation is that there is no difference, regardless of how you say with the A or with the ER. And if anything, to those of us who, which I think is the majority of the black community, to those of us who don't see a difference between the two, it's even more problematic. Because if you're saying it with the A, and you're not like an American person who, damn it. All right, this is really, really complicated. So the reason that the two different versions exist, right? They come from an African word, negus. I think it's Niges, something like that. And it meant king. It meant royalty. It was an empowering word. I don't know what region of Africa, right? Because south, north, east, west, they all have incredibly different cultures, and they're all melting pots of their own kind. But it was an uplifting word, and then slavery happened, and colonizers took that, and I don't know how they ended up with the Niger, and it became incredibly dehumanizing, and we all know the history from there. But Americans at that time like spoke in a much more proper way than we do now, because now America is filled with people of many, many different cultures who they've shared their beautiful cultures with us, and therefore have had a really huge impact on a lot of different regions of the United States. But before that, when it was a mostly white country, people spoke in a much more proper way, because it was like this view that white Americans had of themselves, of we are upright no matter what, we are very, very proper, we are the most proper professional people in the world. And so that's why they say it with an ER, because they didn't allow black people to really go to school, right? Like, you could be punished if you were caught reading a book, because they wanted you to stay as uneducated as possible, because an educated mind is a dangerous one. And they feared that, and even after slavery, that's why systemic racism exists. That's why racism in schools exists, is because it all comes from being afraid of a group of people becoming intelligent enough to realize that they weren't actually inferior. Because with those centuries of enslavement also came centuries of brainwashing, rewriting the entire Bible and using it to manipulate them and say, hey, look, God hates you, so you really are less than us. God says so. Destroying their culture and religion so that they have to accept your own. It goes on. It gets really, really deep. But because we weren't allowed that education, no matter what area of the US you go to, a lot of us have it's not slang. We pronounce things much differently. It's like a dialect. That's a good word to use. Like, if I'm from the South, maybe there's a stereotype that I talk like this, but that's the dialect of English, I guess you can call it, that they speak. That's their vernacular. That's how they pronounce their words. Because we didn't get the education and because we were denied it for so long, instead of pronouncing things with an ER ending, we pronounced it with an A ending. And the interesting thing about that, right, is there have actually been studies suggesting that perhaps those of us, and that comes from black people, but now other people do it as well, perhaps those of us who omit words like that or shorten words like that are actually more intelligent, because we found a way to take a language and communicate the exact same thing that you are communicating with less effort and with less words, and by shortening everything. And so a lot of black people speak with idioms. We speak in metaphors sometimes. There's really not a like when I'm saying something is easy, I'll say that's baby food, and that's a metaphor on top of a metaphor. That's a metaphor on top of a metaphor. I'm saying it's so easy you're gonna eat that alive, which is an idiom. You're not gonna actually eat something. You see how many layers there is already. And then I'm saying it's gonna be so easy to eat, it'll be like baby food, because you don't even have to chew. So when I say that's baby food, there is like layers of metaphors behind that already. And that's what these studies kind of suggest about us, which is nice, because somebody out there said, hey, you know, forever and ever and ever, as recent as like the 1990s, right? As recent as the 90s, people have suggested that we are ignorant because of that. And I don't think too many people know about that study. It's unfortunate that I don't remember who published it. Otherwise, I would love to give them credit. But it's nice to see that one person said, hey, we've not only been shitting on them really harshly for something that our ancestors caused, but maybe they're smarter because of it somehow. So I really, really love and appreciate that perspective. But yeah, so that's A versus ER. There really is no difference. Some people say that there is, but those are the same people who really just don't care if you say it anyways. So it doesn't matter. But when you say it with an ER, they're definitely, no matter who you say it to or around, it definitely always sounds harsher, because that's how it was always said to us, you know? But then I guess the other complication of that is when you, oh, okay, I remember now. I was saying when you aren't a person who naturally, I guess, speaks slang or speaks a specific vernacular naturally to you. It sounds even worse because now it sounds like when you saying it with an A, when you don't normally talk like that with other words that end with an ER, it sounds like you're like stepping into our territory and like the way that we naturally talk. It can feel like somebody who's mimicking you, right? Like you can hear the way that I talk. And if it's the equivalent of I turn to an Asian person and I start speaking with an accent, but I'm still speaking English. It's that sort of uncomfortable level of subliminal racism that we experience when you say it that way. So yeah. Oh my god, this is such a long fucking video. It's hot. It's like 80 degrees and I'm not even inside my apartment. The use of it in comedy, in a way, right? Many of you are probably familiar with the show called Boondocks, and they took a real incident where a white teacher thought there was a difference between A and ER, and he called a black student the N-word. And he justified it, even in court, not just on the news, but in court. He said, it's not a racial slur because I said it with the A, right? So I'm allowed to do that. And that's funny, but it's funny for different reasons depending on who's watching it, right? For some people, it's probably funny because, like, oh, you know, he got caught up in this whole mess. And it's like, yeah, like I would say it with an A, you know, and so it's just funny to see that situation play out in this extreme way. But for other people, it's funny because it's stupid, because those people who see it stupid understand that this isn't a thing that actually exists. And some people might not have even heard of this before. There are a lot of people who I spoke to who had never heard of, oh, I thought the A is just how black people say it. I didn't know there was supposed to be a difference. And that's, I guess, another example of why that difference doesn't even exist. But to those people, it's funny because it's like, what? You're just making shit up. So I just wanted to bring up that example because I thought that was interesting, and there's levels to that as well. But there's definitely, and I blame music, and which unfortunately means that I'm blaming other black people. There's now a normalization of the word, right? People treat it more and more like it's a normal thing to say instead of treating it like a racial slur, like an offensive word. So, like, the one example, two examples I think of, and I'll try to keep these short because it's already a long video, was during one of my live streams, and I think most of you guys were there. The only person I like really remember was Anna, but maybe Repsock was there, maybe Yama was there, but there was one stream where Pitterhead came by, which he usually does, and he was drunk, you know? And I think it was a stream where you guys were actually asking me to do different Pokemon impressions, and I felt super uncomfortable. And don't like go messaging him about this, you know, because it's I don't see it as a big deal. It's not something that bothers me. I've let it go. But he was like, hey, now talk like Mewtwo. And I was kind of confused because I couldn't remember how Mewtwo speaks, especially because in both of the Mewtwo movies, he's had a different voice actor. And he was like, oh, I kind of talk like this, like, what's up, N-word with an A. So that was a thing, and that felt very uncomfortable. And I kind of like, whatever stream that was, if you were to go back and watch it, you can see that I start trying to like talk less, or I start like kind of stumbling more. I was really distracted, especially seeing it on screen and not seeing anybody keep typing, so that it would just at least be out of sight. That really caught me off guard, but I let it go because he's drunk. I don't see him as the type of person who would like say that if he was in a clear state of mind, you know. He's still somebody that I consider a friend of mine, and I don't have any kind of problem with him. But like, I guess in some people's heads, whether they're sober or not, it looks like an acceptable thing to do just because it is everywhere, right? And something that breaks my heart and makes it really, really hard for me to be on social media sometimes is now it's in every meme and now it's in every comment section for the last 7 years. And that made high school really difficult for me too, because when memes started to really, really be a thing, especially when iFunny came out, people were like, hey, look at this. Or like, hey, have you seen that one meme where it's like N-words are like. So I had to constantly hear it, and it really, really sucked. Which I didn't even have internet at the time. I didn't even have a cell phone at the time. So now it's like, no, I haven't seen that meme. Thanks, you're like the 20th person I've heard that word from today. So that really sucked. The other example I can really think of that was, I guess, a little bit more significant than the others is a close friend of mine who I used to work with. And one day we were texting again. We hadn't talked for like 3 years. We found each other on the bus, and so we started texting. And he said it. And I said, hey, like really respectfully, I was like, yo, I'm not really cool with that word anymore. And he was confused what I meant. He didn't realize I was talking about the N-word. And he had like a frustrated level of confusion. He was like, bro, you've always let me say it. What's the big deal now? And I tried to explain to him what I explained to you guys was I was never comfortable with it. I just kind of let it happen. And now I'm back to a point where I'm trying to learn how to speak up for myself again. And I'm trying to learn how to tell people not to say it around me. And thankfully for me, he was still a little bit confused, but he respected me. He had empathy, and he didn't do it anymore. So I was really, really grateful for that. He's an MVP for that for sure. I think another reason that it gets used and why it's also normalized outside of music is because sometimes it's a thing of circumstance. Like I have a friend, Pablo, who always used it, and we had a conversation about it like twice maybe. Like he comes from a mostly black neighborhood where the majority of them never had a problem with him saying it. And because they all grew up under the same conditions with very similar experiences, right? Like he was never at any point in his life a racist person, but he used it because he grew up with people who let him use it. And so he never had a reason to think or feel like it was problematic. So luckily for me though, right, when he did finally come across me and I said, hey, I'm kind of not cool with that, he is such a mature and intellectual person that he says, hey, I get it, I'm sorry. And even now, for the last several years, I can't think of a single time where I've seen him post it, like make any sort of post with that word. And I don't really say him or see him saying it when I see videos of him or when I see him in person again. So it really sometimes isn't a situation of, oh, you know, like I just don't give a damn about you. It's just that that's the environment they come from, and it is what it is. So that's why I, in turn, don't always react with anger, because sometimes that's what the situation is. It's a result of circumstance, and I try to be understanding. I try to talk to these people a little bit more and figure out, is it circumstance or is it ignorance before I make any other sort of, you know, action or reaction or whatever the hell. That way I'm doing my part not to judge people and maybe helping other people be a little bit more aware the next time they're around other black people. So there's that. Then there are guys who just don't care. The school that me and Talisneth come from, there was an issue a year ago where there was a kid who loved to say it, right? There was a lot more kids who say it. And to this day, only 1% of the entire school population is African American or of black descent in general. Doesn't matter if it's Jamaican or what. And so you mostly have Middle Easterns, Southern Asians. It's very rare for it to be a thing where East Asians say it, which is curious to me. Occasionally Caucasians saying it. and definitely a lot of Latinos saying it. And so this one kid in particular who said it all the time, he happened to be South Asian, he was Bangladeshi, and he was saying it, now directing it at a black person. And for as long as they have known him, the black students constantly asked him to stop, right? And what ended up happening was a massive beef took place, from what people were telling me, because I had friends who were still going to that school last year. And you had, what was interesting to me was it turned into a gender war, because you had all the women on the side of the black students saying, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? We should be more sensitive to the situation and to the history. We should respect that we do not have a place in saying that, and that even if it's technically not wrong for us to say it, somehow, if you had the logic to reason that, we should still have empathy for the psychological damage that word can cause to black students. And then almost every guy in the school was like, nah, fuck that. Like, anybody should be able to say it. It shouldn't be a big deal. So that was really, really interesting. And what ended up happening was all the different counselors and office got involved as well. And because it is a serious deal. And a petition was started saying, don't let this person graduate. And it signed. And so the staff approved. They said, fine, yeah, this is how the majority of the student body feels, right? Black and non-black. So you will not be allowed to walk during your graduation, or you won't be receiving your diploma. You're gonna have to redo next year. And people who wait till it gets quiet. So the friends of that guy, which unsurprisingly, they were all people who liked to say it too, they try to cause outrage in defense of him. They're like, no, that's too serious, blah blah blah. And it's like he shouldn't lose his diploma. And it's like, okay, you've like scarred somebody for life. This is an experience, a negative experience that someone will remember for as long as they live. You can do one more year, right? For that level of damage. Because really, what the girl could have done was press charges against the guy. Because she had, 200 witnesses? She could have pressed charges against him and really ruined his life, and she didn't. Instead, she left it up to the staff, who decided, you're not going to get your diploma. And I personally think that that's pretty fitting too, because you could suffer much, much more severe consequences. And they're like, no, but like, when his parents find out, they're going to beat his ass. And it's like, tough fucking shit. You shouldn't be ruining people's lives then. You know, you should be more sensitive and more empathetic. Be a better human being next time. And in the end, I believe that the black students struck a deal on his behalf and said, hey, you know, like, let him walk, let him graduate. And instead he ended up having to do 100 hours, extra hours, because you already have to do community service or something hours to graduate here. I don't know how much, like not that much, probably like 20 hours. But they said, yeah, you got to do another 100 hours to graduate now. So that was his punishment, which is cool. So I guess he spent the rest of his year picking up trash. But yeah, no, that was that incident, and that's the normalization of the word. And the thing that I find interesting about it is people are quick to defend why it's okay to use it. And this conversation doesn't exist for any other racial slur that I'm aware of, right? Maybe in another country, a racial slur against those people is a hot topic as well. But in a global standpoint, as far as I've been aware for my 22 years on this earth, nobody makes a defense on why it should be okay to use Asian slurs or to use European slurs or anything like that, because there are slurs against Italian people, there are slurs against Russian people, there's all types of slurs for people, but no one defends why those words are okay. They're not even a part of our language. Like, especially when you try to think about European slurs, the majority of us can't without Google, right? So it's not like this one word is a word that has to exist in our vocabularies, but we all fight to keep it there. We all fight to let it go. And that feels like another level of racism in and of itself, on a much bigger scale. Is like with the LGBTQ community, right? The F word that's used against the gay community. It was a normalized thing to say for lots of Americans, and even now for lots of Europeans. But for the most part, right, they got together, they said, hey, we are the LGBTQ community, we have rights. They fought for their rights and earned them, which I'm fucking happy, because they are people too. And they took ownership of that word, of the D word used against lesbians, of the F word used against the whole community. And while it is still said sometimes, it's generally accepted as being a terrible thing to say to people, and it's something that we all accept as their word. So, and that's been a word for a lot less time than the N-word has. So why can we not treat it the same way? I think that's really, really interesting. I got another question asking, is agon, which is the N-word backwards, is agon a suitable replacement? No, I'm not laughing at you because of the question, right? I'm taking all these questions very seriously. I'm laughing because I've never heard that before. So that's something completely new to me. But like, this goes back to something else that I said too, because it goes back to two things. One, it depends on the person that you're with. Some groups of people are fine with certain substitution words, like ninja, right? Naruto shit. The word ninja was used as a substitute as well. And there is an artist, I can't remember his name, he might have been Russian, where he was really, really controversial because of the racial and I think even sexist undertones in his music, or even like straight up sexism and racism in his music. And he loved using the word ninja as his substitute. He's like, oh, I'm not technically saying it, so I get away with it. But the thing is, you're still trying to say it, you know? And the other thing to that is that shows that instead of just getting rid of the word, people go through hoops and bounds to try to find a way to get away with saying it, right? Like how for a while, I don't think PewDiePie was the one who started it, but he was one of the people who popularized substituting the G with the B. And that's really, really ignorant as well, because one, that's even closer to just saying the actual thing, which if anything, that's even more offensive, right? Like we're not stupid, you know? It doesn't change the effect that it has on us at all. But it's really ridiculous how far people will go to try to replace and say it without saying it, instead of just letting it go. Like there's so many words in the English language that we could use instead. And even with music, like I'm so against it that even though I could say it, I don't. I substitute stuff when I'm listening to music. I say brothers, I say people, I say something. And when people substitute heavily, that's a really big red flag for us too. There was a time where I was in an Uber and he was talking a lot, and he started getting more and more aggressive as he talked, really hyped up, really amped up. And he said motherfucker a lot, but he would put motherfucker in the places where that word could go. And sometimes there was even delays and pauses, so I'm like, fuck, like he's like actively trying to substitute it. Like he really wants to say it. And yeah, I mean, to some people it matters because it's even more offensive when it is a white person saying it just because of the history. But yeah, I mean, for those wondering, he was a white person and he finally said it. He was like, these N-words. And it really, like, just the whole conversation, like, it makes me so goddamn anxious. And I don't like to say the word anxious just because I'm not a person who actually has anxiety. Maybe I've experienced it before, but anxiety, just like depression, is a word that gets heavily overused and misused. But I think, right, because I've had professionals who I've had a conversation with, and they've described that as anxiety. So I think it's anxiety that I feel, where I'm just waiting to hear you say it. And 9 times out of 10, they always say it, like, to my face. So even when you're not saying it, sometimes you're just making me super uncomfortable, because I can tell how bad you want to say it. And it's just like, fuck, like, now I can't enjoy my night. Maybe I was having an amazing day and now you just kind of fucked up the vibe for me. So, but at the same time, on the other end of things, that's me also being an overthinker. And maybe it's justified, maybe it's not. But, you know, shit. You get the point. So, next topic. There were times where I'll be explaining to people, like, the situation I had at work that I told you guys about. People said it, I told my bosses, they didn't believe me. I got it on video, they still didn't believe me. They punished me very harshly for it, and now we're in a lawsuit against them. And when I tell stories like that, or other stories about it, and how I choose not to react in a violent way, people don't actually respect me for that. People actually think that I'm crazy, or think that I'm weak and I'm soft because of that. A lot of people tell me, like, oh, you know, like, if that was me, if I was in your shoes, like, at that job, I would have fucked them up, and I would have just told everybody, hey, you know, he came at me with a racial slur, I was defending myself. I felt I was in a highly hostile environment. I felt very threatened. And I understand. But to me personally, and like, that's another thing of, is it right to react that way? It's not necessary. But I don't blame people for acting that way, just because the shit that we deal with is so fucking severe. Like, I believe, and I'm trying to go see somebody about it to see, like, hey, do I actually have this or not? I believe that I've had so many experiences of discrimination that I suffer now from PTSD. And maybe that's where my anxiety comes from, when people start saying certain sentences and stuff, and I start, like, waiting for people to say it, even if I've never met them before. But I think that while sometimes it's necessary to an extent, because there are always people who will never understand, and maybe it takes something very extreme to get the point across to these people and to make them say, like, the same reason why I think spanking a child is necessary. Sometimes you communicating to your child doesn't always work, and so they need a little bit of, not very harsh, but they need a little bit of serious physical discipline so that it can finally be ingrained in them, hey, this isn't a thing I should be doing. But that's not my go-to, and it should never be the very first thing you do. There are so few times where I can look at it and say, oh yeah, fuck that. Maybe I would have done it first too. Maybe I would have just socked this guy out too. But I do my absolute best to avoid that, and to have a verbal discourse with people, or to just walk away. Because yeah, there will always be people in any situation where someone will just not understand your viewpoint or not want to understand your viewpoint, and that's fine. You can't please the world, and you don't have to either. So the last note that I really had is, what is the appropriate response? Oh, I just answered that. Okay. Well then, I guess that's the end of the video. It's getting really hot. I've already lost like 80% of my battery life. I know this is incredibly long. I warned you guys. I don't think the other discussion videos will be anywhere near this long. This is definitely one of those ones that you want to just play in the background while you go do other stuff. But a lot of you seemed as interested in this topic as I was, and it was nice to have this, even though it's not like necessarily a dialogue. I appreciate every single one of you in the Discord for always making me feel safe and welcome. And I do feel that we are entering times of more understanding. People are taking things way too extreme, and people are being way too sensitive about a lot of different things. But one story I'll tell you guys to go home with is, I was at a community college for 1 year, and I had joined the basketball club. And while I was waiting for the next game, they wanted me to be on the controls, doing the scoreboard, the like buzzer, all of that stuff, right? And one guy was frustrated, and he said fuck and N-word. And I automatically went into that space like I told you about in the football party, where I'm like, holy shit, and I like crack, I'm like breaking. And not even 2 seconds later, and it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen to this day, right? Because every single person in the basketball club was Asian, outside of me and the captain, who I believe was Hispanic. He looked mixed. It was hard to tell, but every single person in there, even the people on his team, right? 9 people at the exact same time. Hey, you can't say that, you're not black. And it's funny because no one speaks that way, but it's also funny that they all said it at the exact same time, and it was awesome, you know? And one of them, they stopped playing. They dropped the fucking ball. They're pointing at me. They're like, what the fuck is wrong with you, bro? Like, even if he's not, I heard that it's a gym, there's echo. They're like, even if he's not here, why the fuck would you even like say that? Like, that's not our word. And the dude looked at me, and he had genuine remorse in his eyes, and he said, hey, I'm really sorry. And that just made me feel really good. So we're definitely entering a better time, and I think that's where I really want to leave that at, I guess. Leave that on a more positive note. But if you have more topic suggestions, you can always leave that in the suggestions channel, and I'll do my best to get to it. I might be busy with work or other stuff or school, but I'll do my best, and I'll see you next time. Later, people.